Welcome back to What's New with Mead. We're on episode 47, and I have Tony from Manic Meadery here to chat about mead and his meadery. So welcome, Tony. I'm glad you're here.
Hey, Garrett. How you doing?
I'm fantastic. So I just expressed to you a moment ago, I said I love finding meaderies around the world, if I can, to chat with. And you guys were on my list because I hear your name quite a bit, and I hear great things, and I want to get to know you, and I hope that the people listening will hopefully hear about you guys and go and support you. So can you tell us about Manic Meadery?
Well, we started in 2018. We're about 3.5 years in right now with our commercial license. We're located in Crown Point, Indiana, which is in Lake County. It's the northwest side of Indiana, south of Lake Michigan. It's right between Gary and Chicago. Growing up on the border, I often said I was from Chicago. It was the largest city close to us, and but yeah, we're in Indiana, and this area is pretty rich in I would say like the modern commercial mead movement. So basically, it'll be 5 years. Well, yeah, 5 years ago, this coming June 7th, which is my lovely wife Vanessa's birthday, I got fired from my job, which was I was producing events, doing sound, lighting, staging for a corporate entertainment production company. Had that job for 10 years. Prior to that, I toured in a band for 12 years called Groovatron. I played 1,500 shows in 12 years. We didn't make a whole lot of money, but we had a whole lot of great times.
Yeah,
I was the bass player in that band. So that got me in, got married, had a kid, had to get a real job, and I had that job for 10 years. My position got eliminated. I say fired because that was really what they did. Mm-hmm. During that time period, I was experimenting a lot, becoming fascinated with mead. I had already made wine in my basement and had been making beer for a couple of years, some cider, and then started getting influenced by the mead scene around here, mostly Michigan and some Northwest Indiana as well. But I started making some things, playing with some honey. So I kind of had the idea going in when I lost my job. I said, this is go time. I'm tired I'm not going to find another job. I really want to be my own boss, and I want to do something creative. I miss the creativity of music and the freedom of it. So I kind of wanted something though that I controlled the product, that I could also sell and I could represent and I could be behind, and that represented what we did. And I was completely responsible for. If there was an issue, I was going to be accountable and I had control over. So that was really attractive. So luckily, the town we're in, Crown Point, is kind of booming at the moment, and has been for the last decade. Really, a lot of folks from the city move out here and reverse commute from Chicago. It's an old historical town, and there's a lot of farmland which is kind of getting gobbled up. But I realized there was no wineries in Northwest Indiana. So initially I was going to open a brewery. That was a passion for a long time. I come from Munster is where I went to high school, and that's the famous home of Three Floyds Brewing. So Three Floyds and Dark Lord Day, I'm kind of a child of that, which I'll talk a little bit more about later probably, and their influence on me. But I've been going to Three Floyds since I was 21 years old in late 2001, and drinking their beer and seeing how they made it. And it just fascinated me, the production process. I've always had an obsession with wine, and then mead was a natural progression to that. So basically, I got very influenced by Ken Schramm up in Ferndale, Michigan, and Bee Nectar. And I was very much a dry person. I liked dry wines, Bordeaux-style wines. I liked Pilsners and hoppy IPAs. I liked sour beers that were, not the new style chunky sours with fruit in them, but more old school, European style sours and whatnot. And I never in a million years thought I'd be making a primary income off of dessert mead, which is what we really specialize in, which I can, we'll talk a lot about, I'm sure. But I had Ken Schramm's Madeline Batch 1, which is just Boysenberry Mead, and with a friend, and he gave it to me, and I was like, oh, and I drank it, and I was like shocked by just the sweetness, but then I was shocked by the fruit expression. I was shocked by the honey expression and how fresh it tasted. And I thought about it all night after I left. And so then I went on a hunt, and I started getting into maybe I do like sweet stuff. I've just never had good sweet stuff.
Mm.
And so I started making real big melomels at home, and that led to just thinking, gosh, this is going to catch on, I thought, and maybe I should just do a winery. There's no wineries in Crown Point or Northwest Indiana for that matter at the time. So I figured I'd be the first one in our county, and that started that journey. I won a Mazer Cup in 2018, right in the transition from home to pro. We had already decided to go pro. But that was for a blueberry melomel we made very much in the SRAM style, not a whole lot of water, pretty much berries and honey. Mm-hmm. And that was kind of a shock. I didn't really do a lot of competitions. I only entered 3 as a home brewer, and I get into Mazer Cup was pretty cool. So that got me into the AMMA and Mazer Cup. I started judging. I'm a BJCP mead judge. I helped out with AMMA. I've done many presentations with them. I'm kind of a spaz when it comes to research and development. I really enjoy it. I'm not a stickler to any one thing. I like challenging norms, and I like experimenting on my own. I'm a culinary person. I look at meat as culinary, art, and science, all 3 combined, and it's a harmonious blend. I love that aspect of it. So we opened in late 2018. I brought in my best friend since 6th grade, Keith Cantwell. He left his corporate job at Dyson vacuum cleaner company in Chicago, and he was our primary investor, and we were all self-funded. We took all of our money. I liquidated my 401k. And these are things I'm saying that I don't always recommend to people. I've talked more off a cliff of opening a winery than encouraging them, because it's not for the meek. And so we went all in, and during that time of all the R&D and getting the place, it took about 9 months to open the facility. It's 3,000 square feet, a little over about 3,300 square feet, with half of it being tap room, no food, just serving our own mead, wine, and cider. And I'm, as the name suggests, manic. Growing up, mental illness has been a key thing. My wife's a mental health counselor. I've had, diagnosis as a younger adult, as a little bipolar, hypomanic, and I kind of wanted to own it. So that's where the name came from. And I do, like, the way I work is I'm just all about life. I'm all about experience. And I, like I said, I'm kind of a spaz, but it doesn't ruin my life. So it doesn't affect my life negatively as long as I harness that energy. And that's how I looked at it as the meadery. I was kind of making something that could be a problem in my life and trying to turn it into something that was a virtue. And so that's the birth of the name. A lot of people don't know that. So kind of nice to get that out. I've told a few people when they ask, but that kind of shaped what we do. We do all styles, from the driest things you've ever had in mead to some of the sweetest, to every fruit you can imagine, to ciders of all styles. We have a wine program. We do dry reds and whites. We don't really do any sweet traditional wine because of the mead. We do sessions. We do sparkling, full strengths. We barrel age. We do, we've done Méthode Champenois. We've done Sur Lie aging and batonnage, and we've tried to experiment and constantly play with styles. So that leads us to having a very large menu at the meadery. It's generally, I don't know, there's usually about 40 things on the menu. Wow. So it's pretty intense, and we're starting to try to brand and get certain things. So yeah, that's been really good. We're supported by a really nice club that is mostly just a dessert mead package that we do. You can get on a waiting list for it. We max it out at 300 people. They really do a great job. It's a Manic Founders Club. They support us. They really helped us through COVID. Mm-hmm. And we direct ship through Vino Shipper. So there's a lot of stuff on there all the time, different offerings, and we do releases on there as well. And then pretty much we don't really distribute much yet, but we just acquired a brewery in December of last year, which was the former Devil's Trumpet Brewery in Merrillville, Indiana, which is about 10 minutes away from our current location. So it's a 9,000 square foot facility that already had a lot of the infrastructure, and we're moving all production there, which is almost done. We're waiting on the state to finalize the licensing. But we got pretty much everything moved over. We have a new tasting room built, and we added a brewery. Yeah. Called Gnosis Brewing, with the G. That's the Greek word for knowledge. And brought in a couple other friends and partners, some really great brewers, because I'm not Superman by any stretch, and I know what it takes to make beer. And I needed more help. I just kind of wanted to do it. I wanted to give these guys a shot because they make great beer, and I kind of wanted to refresh my brewing chops. So here we are now. We're making beer, mead, wine, cider under one roof, and we have a second tap room location opening. We're expanding the tap room where we remove production from, so we're keeping that location. And we just got off of this last weekend hosting the Sugar Belt Mead Fest, which is the largest mead festival in the world, as far as I know. Over 1,000 attendees overall, 28 meaderies, 2 breweries, and that was in Crown Point here. And so it's a whirlwind, and I don't see it slowing down. I'm learning something every single day, and I think the networking, the connections, and the experimentation, and being humble, and managing your ego, and just opening your eyes, and then listening to the market, and being you have to be an accountant, a lawyer, a property manager, and a bar back, and a custodian to do this business. So yeah, it's been crazy, and I have no complaints so far.
Yeah. Well, so one thing is, you said a while ago when you first started, you said you didn't imagine yourself being someone who sells mostly dessert meads. So do I take it that most of your product that you're slinging that people come in for is the sweet stuff?
Yeah. So I still have a passion for drier things, and I make a lot of dry things and stuff on the semi-sweet side. As far as mead goes, I really like, I think we're known for, we push boundaries of ABV. I think we have probably the lab tested one of the higher records of ABV in a packaged bottle, which was a complete accident, by the way. It wasn't intentional, but it turned out great. And we do a lot of barrel aging, and you pick up ABV from spirits, legally. So I kind of have that, and that kind of alcohol presence in oak dries things out a lot. And we do a lot of things that are drier. We do ciders that are dry, and session meads and other things. But when I make it, I just make it being in tune with the market. And I listen to the market. When you have a business like this, one of the things I tell people when I consult a little bit or give them advice, because there's a lot of people that want to do this, is, you can love what you love, and that's okay. And you should represent that, and you should be happy, and you should make things you love personally, but you're not buying your product, the consumer is. So you have to be aware of the market. Now in this area, you have, like I said, Schramm's and Bee Nectar, and then you have, Pips, one of the highest rated dessert meaderies in the world, and Standard in Villa Park, and then you have Misbehaving and Boneflower. There's just a whole cluster of meaderies around the lake. That's why we call the festival Sugar Belt. It's kind of a joke. But yeah, so I push stuff out there in all kinds of styles. I've done Nordic methyl glens and drier things, and you have people that like them, and I'm always going to make them, but I just might do a 300 bottle release rather than a 1,200 bottle release, because it seems to me that what people find unique in mead, especially the crossover from the beer community, tends to favor the big fruit, big adjunct, sweeter side of things. Now, that doesn't mean to say that we go cloying. We definitely extract a lot of tannin and acid from a lot of our stuff. We use a lot of whole fruit and ingredients such as that offers a lot of things to balance with. So, balance is very important to us for the most part. So even our sweeter stuff is going to be balanced. It's going to be built for aging. It's going to hold up structurally. So yeah, I would say that probably a good 65 to 75% of our sales are on the dessert, the sweet, like medium sweet to dessert style.
And so, and the side of balancing, because that's a topic I want to get into. As you know, I was completing a video today and talking about balancing a traditional, and obviously traditionals are pretty tough because you're relying so much on good process, quality honey, whatever yeast choice is most appropriate, but then you also have to factor in that balance element. And I personally balance a lot of my stuff with oak in some form, and then especially in the world of traditionals, specific acids. So I used a little bit of citric acid in this most recent one. How are you adjusting, or I guess, are you adjusting acid profiles post fermentation, or are you trying to anticipate and do it earlier on?
Okay, so I've done a lot of playing with acid. We've never packaged a mead that had any acid additions. Yeah, and traditionals, I'm very much a fan of traditional meads. In fact, I'm working on a project now doing doing a 25. It'll be a 24 pack of 7-ounce bottles that have monoflorals in them, and they're going to be all exactly treated the same, fermented at the same time, same sweetness, same everything. So that'd be pretty neat.
I want it on that. That sounds like that's
Yeah.
like my world. I love those tests and those side by sides.
We have really, I mean, we have moved the market a little bit, I think, because we've introduced people to what traditionals can be in a lot of ways, even our drier stuff. And some of our most popular stuff is, monoflorals, maybe like a coconut blossom from Hawaii that I have a connection with, aged in a Jamaican rum barrel for like 4 or 5 months, something like that. Or like a metafoam in a bourbon barrel, things of that nature. But yeah, so the reason I don't do it is not because I'm absolutely 0% against it. I think there's people, some of the best mead makers in the world go crazy with their tannin and acid adjustments post-fermentation, even pre-fermentation. Occasionally I'll use a little fermentation tannins, and I do use a heck of a lot of oak in different fashions, mostly through cubes or barrels. But for me, with traditionals, I generally balance. I want to balance it with like if I want a little more bite, a little more acid, I'll kind of pick a yeast strain that'll give me a little more brightness, and then we will bubble a lot of things. So I'll use the carbonic acid of carbonation to give me a little bubbles if I want that brightness, and it's just because I've never personally been able to lasso in not making something with acid additions taste just a little bit different than the actual honey itself. So, I made acid adjustments in traditional wines, I guess, and I've also taken down acid. That's what I do the most when fermenting wine, buffering it because it's just too low in a pH level. But I wouldn't say, most of the time it's just alcohol as a balancer for a trad, and then the tannins, and then we just kind of bring the sweetness, because we don't always back sweeten. Sometimes we do residual sugar varieties of our trads that'll go into different barrels and whatnot. We use a lot of ale yeast for that stuff, something that's going to kind of peter out quicker. But when we go dry and back sweeten, which is what I prefer for a trad, I do prefer to go dry and then bench trial it. We generally just bring the sweetness up to a level that's going to balance it. So that kind of determines what it's going to be, so to speak. Which makes most of our trads that aren't barrel aged or aren't super high in alcohol, or don't have a lot of brightness or don't have any other fruit in them, are gonna turn out to be more in the off dry to semi sweet range often. So or we'll put it in a barrel and the booze will be the balancer. It'll be a big boozy sweet mead, with rum notes or something of that nature. So for me, it's one of the areas I'm not a pro on, although I know I've done a lot of testing with it, and gone crazy with different acids and, mixing tartaric and malic and citric and, dialing in the ppms and seeing how it affects relative, titratable acidity and pH, and really got into that. When it comes to trads, that's just kind of our style. We just don't really mess with the acid level as one of the balancers.
Yeah, well, it's fair. And from a commercial standpoint, obviously, it's much more difficult to do post-fermentation things sometimes. Even when it comes to back sweetening, like you mentioned, I can't imagine you got a 600 gallon batch and you're trying to back sweeten it. Yeah, there's just that's a lot. It's a lot to go through. So I totally understand that. Same thing for acid adjustments. At a homebrew level, that stuff's easy. My little 1 gallon, I could sprinkle a little bit of that citric acid in and stir my honey in and call it good. But there's no way on a grand master huge scale that it's going to be simple. So I understand that completely.
Yeah, and I mean, some of the best mead makers I know, like in the homebrew community, like Carvin Wilson or Tom Repis, or just a lot. Those guys are. I mean, they know everything about balancing those things in their show meads, and they know when to need something because their palates are phenomenal going in, and which is also just extremely important in this industry. And it's just not a style I adopted because I think I found something maybe slightly unique. The only time I probably will end up, I more than likely will end up using acid in the future as we do more sessions. I want to do a run of monofloral sessions that are very low ABV, and I have found use for that in the past doing experimentation. So that's where the density of the flavor profile, becomes kind of like bland. when you have, you know, a more diluted honey. So that's where I think I'll probably end up using acid when we're starting to do like 4.5%, you know, off dry to semi-sweet traditionals in a can that are carbonated, you know, where it could definitely use a little bit. And I played with it, and I think I've had really good results. So yeah, I'm not quite there yet. And for the most part, we do, you know, a lot of the stuff is with fruit, and I get a lot of extraction and acid from fruit. So oftentimes I'm trying to tame it down.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Traditionals, I mean, what we're talking about is really only gauged for traditionals because, well, like you said, fruited stuff is, you made a comment earlier. A lot of people really tend to go to fruited things. And I think that's true of not just people who consume and buy those meads, but also who make them. It can be, using fruit can be a little bit easier. It's easier to get more profile out of it. You know, most of the time those end up a little bit sweeter in some regard. And so I think people, it's a little easier to run that route. So all of this is traditional based, kind of what we're talking about right now.
Yeah. I mean, it's the Pilsner, the lager of mead making. You know, it respects the nuance of the honey, and you have nothing to hide behind. It's really easy to detect flaws in a traditional. And I guess the first thing I'll drink if I'm going somewhere and they have a traditional on, I mean, that's the first thing I'm going to go for. Yeah. Absolutely. And it's what I would judge a mead maker on first and foremost if I was, you know, in that mood.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I really do. I love the fact that I think there's a future in mead where the traditional mead, I mean, because the homebrew community is insane now. They're making such good mead. Mm-hmm. You know, podcasts like yours, and then all the Facebook groups and the Reddit things, and just all the information out there. It's a really big scene of home mead makers, and they have access to so much information. And I've just watched it explode. People bring me bottles all the time, and some people would bring me, you know, this is the second thing I ever made. And I'm like, wow, that's better than the second thing I ever made.
Yeah.
That's phenomenal. And then, you know, traditionals, I think I would love to see off dry to semi-sweet traditionals get a nice little boost in the commercial world. And I think they are a little bit. So I'm ready for it when it really happens. If I could sell 75% trads, I would be all about it.
Yeah. I made my first ever dry traditional mead that I actually enjoyed a while back. And it was quite the adventure because, you know, sweetness, as you kind of mentioned earlier, sells in a lot of ways. People like sweet, especially when it comes to mead. And so having that extra little boost of honey can often not necessarily hide problems, but it does kind of cover up some of the flaws you can find sometimes. So going dry, man, it was tough, but it was pretty fun. It's a good adventure, good experience.
Yeah.
Makes me want to keep trying.
Yeah. That's probably the most difficult thing. In fact, when I judge competitions now, I'm often put on the dry. I request to be on the dry tables a lot because I want to see what people are doing. And I think it's kind of a dry trad is one of probably and even in competition world, one of the least entered and sometimes one of the least respected by some people. So because they think, oh, it's just a dry trad, blah, blah. They don't even want it for their own palate. For me, I just want to see what someone could do. Cause you know, there's a perception of sweetness even in a dry mead. And so when you can balance, you know, the ABV with the honey varietal and the fermentation characteristics, and get it to a point that, you know, it's not going to, you know, rip your tongue off and it's not making you cough and it's not just all ethanol or burnt rubber, you know, and you're getting like all those flowers in a real subtle way that's palatable. And the way I found to do that with dry meads is if they're not going to have anything else going on, it's just a dry mead. I just lower the ABV a little bit, tends to help. And then I ease off, you know, the tannin structure because you're already going to get, you know, the dryness is already going to give you kind of that note. So, you know, although I've had some dry, one of my favorite meads I had last year at Mazer Cup was in homebrew was a dry buckwheat, Eastern buckwheat. And that was because that's and I had to convince, I had an argument with my judge partner because they didn't like dry meads and he's a respectable guy. I love him and I know him for years, but I was like, this is insane how good this is for what it is. And it was like a sack strength dry. It was like one of the hardest things you could make palatable, you know?
Yeah.
And I was just enamored by it because it was really drinkable. And I'm thinking, wow, I would totally do this just because, yeah, like you said, it's just such a hard thing to master. And then when you find something that difficult, you can make good. It's almost like a challenge.
I have a buckwheat bochet that I oaked with rum oak chips that turned out really good. And I'm going to send it to a competition. But it's one of those, the same vein. Like people are like, buckwheat, hold on. That's red flag number one. And then you bochet the buckwheat honey. Hold on. It just kind of turns into this not a great situation. But it turned out pretty good. So sometimes it works out. Sometimes it doesn't.
I love bochet's. We do a lot of that as well. Mm-hmm. And I've been known to bochet really interesting varietals and get guff for it. Like I did a big Tupelo bochet. And it was
people were just mad they're probably just mad for the cost of the Tupelo at that point.
They were very mad. And I kind of just did it. I did it just because I said I was going to do it, and I was challenging my opinion with bochet's, and I'm sure you know this because if you did buckwheat, and especially with buckwheat because it's such a pungent honey, even the Western buckwheat has a very distinct flavor. But I'm sure the old adages I like to challenge are, it doesn't matter, just use melter honey, or just bochet the cheapest wildflower you can find from Dutch Gold or whatever. Use brew honey, And I wanted to experiment with that and think, no, if you bochet correctly, you can, even if it's 100% bochet, which is what I do, you can still get varietal character out of the honey even after it's caramelized.
Yeah, and you should. I feel like you should.
Yeah. Like we have a collab with, go ahead.
No, you're good.
I have a collab with Standard Meadery where we discovered this for a release we did. And Standard's a great meadery in Villa Park. And we do a collab where we bochet something together and we actually collab. I mean, I go there, he comes here, and we trade on and off. And, we have three 50-gallon brew kettles, and we, over the fire, we actually bochet it. It's usually about a 6 or 7 hour process. And we go low and slow, and we got pretty good at it. But we get it pretty caramelized. I mean, it looks like it's almost stout color, but we don't burn it. We get right on that cusp where we get all we can out of that caramelization. But we did a raspberry blossom to start, the first one, and man, it was incredible. And to the fact where he did end up doing another batch of it. And so we've done raspberry blossom, we've done star thistle, we've done Tupelo, we've done orange blossom. These things, and they all taste different. And so I just thought it was really neat. So yeah, doing the Tupelo was kind of like my little hey, this is still Tupelo, and you can still taste the Tupelo character in the mead. And it's a really big sweet mead. It was aged in a bourbon barrel. One of the things we do is age it in a spirit barrel, either a brandy or a bourbon barrel. And but that raspberry blossom one, that's his favorite. Adams was the first one we did, and it's the way that bochet is just incredible. I mean, you get this candied red fruit kind of vibe, and it's just it's floral and totally different than the Tupelo. I mean, side by side we made identical things, and they're bochet. There's all the bochet character, but then there's a whole layer of flavors that completely separates them and makes them unique. So I thought that was pretty neat.
So are you able to I've always heard some controversy with bochet's as far as selling them. Is there any issue when it comes to selling? And
legally, you mean?
Yeah. Yes.
No, there's not that I'm aware of. Yeah, you're just boiling honey as far as I'm concerned. You don't have to really state it. In fact, we don't even need a federal formula approval to do it because it's just honey. It's a traditional. So, you make it and you're good, basically.
Interesting. I'd always heard, I can't remember where I heard it, but somebody was like, yeah, you can't really do bochet's because of, I can't remember what the reason was. So, and then I thought that was interesting. So maybe that was just a situation.
They might be, I don't know if maybe they were confused and thought they were referring to braggots. Braggots that's with the gray area when you're dealing with grain. Legally we can't use grain, which is insane. But even with our brewery space, we have to have a physical gate. Yeah.
How does that work? Okay.
Yeah. It's one of those security gates that you would see at industrial building. It's just an accordion style, and we can open it up if we need to move stuff, and then we can lock it. And, it's kind of just for looks. And it's kind of ridiculous, but at the end of the day, we'll do whatever we need to do. I mean, I could probably do a whole podcast about the ridiculousness of the liquor laws, alcohol laws, and not only just the federal level, but then all the individual states and then the counties. Mm-hmm. It's insane.
Yeah. Well, maybe we might do another one, and we'll dive deep in that, because you're right. That could be a whole hour, 2 hours of just podcasting.
Yeah, and I do have a Facebook group called Defund the TTB. If anyone joins that, it's pretty funny. It's a lot of pro brewers and winemakers and the like, basically venting about their frustrations about label approvals and the stupid responses we've gotten. And it's kind of like a little funny forum. And I made it public because I want people to be able to read it. So
That's fun.
it's respectful, but it's like, really, guys, this is ridiculous. And we post screenshots. It's pretty funny.
Yeah.
Because there's so much bureaucracy. It's like, I'm all about being compliant and doing things the right way, but there's so much ridiculous, archaic laws out there, and it's so hard to navigate sometimes.
Okay, so let's. I want to switch to recipe development, as you mentioned earlier. Part of obviously owning a meadery and building one from the start is to have I'm not going to say a book of recipes, but to have an idea of some things. So what did you come into Manic Meadery with as your like starting point, as your beginning little recipe?
Yeah, so I wanted to represent a lot of styles since we weren't bringing in guest taps and whatnot. I wanted people to be able to come in there and find something they liked, and at the time when we first opened, I wasn't, I made less sweet stuff. I was very, very much down the spectrum. I still am, but like I said, we do have a plethora of the sweeter things because it sells. So basically, jotting down ideas in notebooks and then coming up with ways to refine it on a commercial level, working with base meads. Okay. So we had a few different styles when we started it. We were pretty comfortable with like our version of a big fruit melomel, that was going to be sweeter. So we figured, okay, cool. We'll do a cherry one, we'll do one with raspberries and we'll have a few of those around all the time and we'll rotate them. So that'll cover the sweet stuff. And then we'll do a few traditionals. At the time I was kind of like focused on like 12 to 14% traditionals pretty much. And so, we figured we'll start, I think the two trads we started with was Star Thistle and Mesquite. And also Orange Blossom. So I had 3 traditionals on when we opened. The Orange Blossom ended up being, it's a Florida Orange Blossom, which we still have on tap to this day. We always have it on. Excuse me. And we ended up bubbling that one to make it a little different.
Is it 12% in bubbling? Sorry.
It's about 13%. Yep.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yep. And that was actually, so that became a style for us from that base. So we did those trads and we had those, and then it was like, all right, let's make a base mead and do some post-fermentation fruit adds or methyl glens or different adjuncts. And then we can back sweeten with different honeys and just kind of experiment. And that's what it turned into. So we also opened with, we fermented a big, this honey we got that was from the fall in Florida, and it just had just crazy flavors. It was not something I wanted to use in just a regular, you wouldn't make your normal, regular old wildflower mead with it. It was very pungent and present, but in a good way. And we thought, okay, we're going to do something with this. So we took that and we made this Nordic series where we used different spices from Nordic area. And first one was called Nordic Quad, and it was juniper berries, rose hips, coriander, and hibiscus. Oh. And then we ended up back, but that one that dried out. We dried that thing out to 19% and then back sweetened it to around 1040 maybe. But it didn't perceive super sweet because of the booze and the spices.
Right.
But it ended up being this crazy, foresty, flowery, like big, almost like a Nordic style Viking mead. So we did that one, and that's still like legendary because we don't do a lot of that. And then of course we're like, oh, let's make a Trinity. We'll make a 3-spice one, and we did Cascade hops, spruce tips, foraged spruce tips, and what was the other thing? A little bit of lavender, I believe. And so we did that one, and that one did pretty well. And we ended up doing another batch of the quad, and we actually are going to bring it back at some point here when we get it on our schedule. But yeah, so we had that, and then we kind of fell into that. As far as session meads, we didn't plan on making session meads initially. We were doing cider. So we basically make our cider a lot like you'd make a session mead, or at least a very common way, where we're drying out our cider. Mm-hmm. And then we're taking that base and, okay, we pull off what we need. And then, we'll add the fruit, we'll add the spices, we'll back sweeten it to where we want it. Mm-hmm. We'll either back sweeten it with a combination of concentrated juices, and we use a lot of apple concentrate. We don't use sugar, table sugar in our meadery, even for cider. So even our regular like our dry spy is a heirloom apple cider. It's a real basic. It's about 1004 final gravity, but it dries out to about 996, 997. So we just add a little bit of Northern Spy concentrate from up there at King's Orchard in Traverse City area, Michigan. And so we use that to back sweeten it. And then, or we'll even use honey sometimes, but it's either honey or concentrated fruit we use for back sweetening. We never use sugar. And so we started getting good at making the ciders. There's a cherry one I'd been making since before I even made my first mead. It was kind of what I used to make when I made hoppy beers to have on for people who didn't like beer. And we still make that to this day. It's called Traverse City Cherry. It's literally our cider base with a combination of apple concentrate and Montmorency cherry concentrate to back sweeten it. So it basically goes dry. We stabilize it, back sweeten it. We bench trialed that one years ago, and it has not changed since. So it's very consistent. So that was a style. And then, like I said, that 13% orange blossom, we ended up making a wildflower base like that in a big tank. We had at the time, which was about 300 gallons. And then we just bust off 200-liter Speedle fermenters of it. And then we would add stuff in secondary. We were like, let's do a mojito one. And, we just get ideas, the flavor combos, and, throw some lime juice and lime zest in there and a little bit of mint, and then just taste it and figure out where we liked it. And then we just kind of try these little batches in the tap room. And if something really caught on, we'd make a bigger batch. If something died out, we probably wouldn't bring it back. Of course, there's always one person that wants you to bring it back.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's kind of how we developed, because we were really learning on the fly, and, there's a lot of ways to do a meadery. I think nowadays people's attention span is so short. You need to be, we got all this barrage of the media and all these things around us all the time, and they want something new every week. They want, they had it. They want something new. So I think the first year we were open, we ended up releasing, not all bottle or anything, but at least we made probably, it was close to 75 different things.
Wow.
And at this point, I've lost track. I'd love to count, but it's hundreds and hundreds of things in the last 3 years. And so, we've evolved over time, but to start, we kind of had a high ABV traditional base that we would blend with things to make on the fly, so we could really vary our menu. And then we had our specific big residual sugar fruit melomels, and then we had our cider program, and then we brought in some wine and started making wine as well for our dry, because we do a lot of dry wines as well. We're actually expanding our wine program now, which is where I get a lot of pleasure in that, because I'm doing big Bordeaux style dry red wines right now, and I'm really excited about that program. Kind of makes up for a lot of the sweet stuff. So, but I wanted to have it all at once. So I had mead, wine, and cider on the menu when we opened. So from then, now we're doing session meads. In fact, I'm drinking one now. We're starting to can session meads. This is called Scarlet.
Yeah.
This is kind of very interesting. It's obviously looks like a beer. People like the 16-ounce cans. A lot of the beer community starts to move over to mead, as you're probably well aware. Mm-hmm. This one's a little departure. We've done some big, sweet fruit ones with a lot of fruit left in them, kind of like I was making fun of the sour craze earlier. We've done a lot of that stuff because people love it. This is more of a quaffable kind of middle of the range. I think it's 1022, and it's a tea mead. So this was just a methyl blend with a local grindhouse cafe that has a tea called Scarlet, and it's an herbal tea. So it has rubus, rose petals, hibiscus, dried citrus zest. It has dried cherries, dried blueberries, black currants. So it's just a fruit salad of tea. Yeah. And I tasted all these teas because we were doing this collab, and so we just basically throw the tea in a hot bag, and I have a good idea what it takes for tea, but we ended up adding more, and we did literally did a ball jar, like a 1 quart ball jar test run. Uh-huh. I only leave the tea in for a few days. Honestly, I think you extract some green stuff that you don't really want if you leave it in too long. So I'd rather dose it with a higher rate, and then we back sweetened it, and it turned into this scarlety, pinky, bubbly kind of. It's really floral. It almost has this Hawaiian punch vibe, but it's a tea mead. So it's kind of back. But now we're doing sessions because it seems like we have a canning line now, a small canning line, and we're going to start canning our cider brand, and we're going to start doing more sessions because I'd like to start distroing a little bit more and not just selling direct. So as we expand, I think session meads, it's something trying to get the price down a little bit and make it more affordable and something that people could think about getting a 4-pack on the weekend and not just, this real expensive stuff. Cause mead is obviously very pricey. So it's something to consider always. So
yeah,
constant.
you're talking about obviously canning and moving to lower ABV stuff, and not necessarily lower ABV, but that I've seen a trend towards that with mead making recently, where people are really trying to, just like the hard seltzer land, bring down stuff to 5% or less and make it really marketable to that community, because that community is obviously huge. There's a lot of people who are only hard seltzer drinkers. Yeah. And that's prompted me to try and make some. I have some kegging equipment at my house. And so, one of my things I've been trying to do is get that down as well and kind of just get a standard 5% base. And then, like you're saying, eventually be able to add my flavor components and things. It's hard because the lower ABV you go, the more watery you get. And then you kind of have to play the game of, how do I make this not feel like I'm just drinking water? It's tough.
Yeah, that's where like yeast is important, I think. I would definitely play with yeast. I mean, ale yeast there's a lot of uses with ale yeast, and you get a lot of esters, which would give you just a lot. I get a lot more fruit out of less honey when I'm playing with beer yeast sometimes, and you get kind of like a familiar. You get beer esters. It's pretty wild. And then obviously the honey varietal. I haven't gone down to like 5%. Usually our base is usually about 6.5 to 7%. And then after the back sweetening, depending upon what that is, it usually lands between 6 and 5.5 to 6.5%, depending upon what it is or whatever.
Right.
But I actually, you mentioned the acid earlier, which is why I said, I'm probably gonna have to start doing that, because I do want to do a kind of like what you're saying. I want to do a 4.5% monofloral, and I'm going to start with Florida Orange Blossom because I'm very familiar with it. And I want to make it flavorful, but light, crushable, really low residual sugar. Yeah. So in that case, it's going to be boring, and there's a very good chance I'm going to need a little help on that one. So haven't really got into that yet, but we're going to go for, hopefully have some out this summer. And, with Orange Blossom honey, you do get a little bit more of a citrusy kind of floral bite, so that helps. Well,
and you mentioned carbonic acid earlier, and that's something that not a lot of people, well, I don't say that, people don't always think about. And when you carbonate something that is created, carbonic acid is put or created inside of that mead or whatever you're making, automatically adding a smidge of acidity. Now, I wouldn't say I haven't had so much experience with it to say it's substantial as dosing with acid outside of normalcy. Like, I don't necessarily supplement out and say that my carbonic acid is going to fix everything,
right?
But it adds enough to factor into your choices when developing a recipe.
Right. Yeah, and the thing I love about bubbles, I mean, I am obsessed with them in a lot of ways. I played around with it a lot. Carbonation level, and now get into the beer world as we're making beer as well. It's very important, obviously, in that community. But I like how bubbles hit your tongue initially, and it's kind of like why soda got so popular, like pop, like soda pop, Coca-Cola, for example. High residual sugar in Coca-Cola. If you drink it flat, it just tastes like sugar, like it's disgusting.
Yeah.
When you have it and it's got the carbonation, you're getting that prickly sensation initially, and then it fades out to sweetness, and then you take another sip to get the prickly again, and then it fades out to sweetness, and it's kind of like a cycle. So sometimes acid, like that can linger a little more, and it can also mess with your palate. Whereas I think the bubbles kind of just balance the experience and kind of take your palate on kind of like a little mini journey that kind of makes you reach back for it. Yeah. And I really love carbonated meads that are well constructed. One of my favorite things we've done recently, our mead maker, we're a small staff. We have me and my business partner, and then we have two lovely ladies that run the tap room, Haley and Allison, and then we have some random people that help out with that. We just had Had our dear friend Rob, who's in the tap room, had to leave because he got a really great opportunity, but he's still around. He's still a family. And and then we have our mead maker, Brandon, and he's a workhorse. He does everything. He basically started, we kind of mentored him, but he's already keeping bees and making beer at his house. He goes home and makes mead after he makes mead all day for me. It's pretty wild. And he's just a workhorse. He's really into it. He's a biologist, by education. So he's really interested in all the kinetics and he loves taking labs, and he's a great person to have on your team. And anyway, he has a place in Tennessee that muscadine's big in Tennessee. So Smoky Mountains, muscadine. Gatlinburg area. He grew up going to this cabin, and when he got older and he started drinking the wine, it's all this muscadine out there. It's a big thing, and so muscadine if you're not familiar, is very pungent. It's foxy, so to speak. It's like skunky, and you could smell it from across the room when you open a bottle. It's pretty wild, and so it's one of those things. It's kind of like intoxicating, but people can be turned off by it. But I love it. And anyway, he introduced me to those grapes, and he made one this year that we did, and it's about 13 to 14% in a champagne bottle. We carved it max level, and it's like it perceives as semi-sweet, and man, it's incredible. But yeah, the same thing, like that carbonic acid with those tight bubbles, and then all those aromatics. That's the other thing the bubbles do. They'll bring out aromatics in a different way, which I think is really cool, and I think that helps on the sessions too. But especially with something so perfumey and has such a big nose, having those bubbles, kind of like champagne, you really get a lot out of those bubbles releasing, all those sensory compounds. So yeah, I'm a big fan of that mead that Brandon made. It's called Foxy Mountain because it's foxy and it's from the mountains. But yeah, that's kind of a style we really like, the sparkling piments, so to speak.
Yeah. So what are some, it sounds like you have a pretty rotating list of, I would say flagships. Like, do you have any standards that are just always there?
Yeah. So packaged wise, to represent our dessert side, we're known for blueberries. I won the Mazer Cup in 2018. It was a blueberry mead that we made. And I literally drove up over the border. Michigan's only 45 minutes from here. It's the biggest per capita blueberry growers in as far as I know in the country.
Wow.
Michigan's it's a plethora of amazing fruit. And then in northern Indiana, there's also a lot of blueberries. So I went over the border. I was getting different fruits to play with. And I'm like, I'm going to do a blueberry mead because at the time I didn't know anyone who did a big blueberry dessert mead. I know, Schramm's didn't do one yet, and they since have. And I heard they were difficult to work with, all this stuff. So it was late in the season. I got this big carton of blueberries and fermented them. Had a stuck fermentation. Had to repitch it. It was all whacked out. I thought it was all screwed up and played with it, and it was one of those learning experiences. Ended up winning the Mazer Cup with it, and so I'm like, well, I have to make this. We called it Blueberry Bomb at the time.
Yeah.
When I went back commercially to remake that, right, we got our license. I went up there. I'm tasted blueberries from about 7 or 8 different farms. I tried to go to Indiana, couldn't find. I'm like, these don't taste right. These don't taste right.
Mm-hmm.
And I went back to that same fruit stand, same time of year, tasted the blueberries. I was like, Bing. I'm like, I'm going to need like 800 pounds of these. And she's like, okay, let me make a phone call. She's like, I'm just going to send you to where we get them from. So I ended up going as Eisen Farm is where I get them from. Great family-owned farm right in the coast there of Lake Michigan. And they educated me about blueberries. I found out I was calling them late harvest blueberries because that's all I knew. They were smaller. They're high sugar, but they're high tannin and high acid content. They have like almost everything, and they're just great for making wine or, mead. Mm-hmm. And they told me, oh, those are Elliott blueberries, called Elliott's. And I said, oh, I want some Elliott's. So I got my 800 pounds, and this past year we used about 6,000 pounds of them. So that's
question, when you're treating those, are you pectic enzyme? Are you like cold macerating? Are you juice? Like, what are you doing?
Yeah, so for the big fruit bombs, and I've done, there's some really good information. There's a AMMA presentation I've done. There's a lot of stuff of me talking about this. So I'll try to give you the brief because I could go on about it forever.
Yeah.
But I'll give you the brief explanation. So anyway, that mead ended up being called Elliott. So that's a flagship of ours. It's a blueberry orange blossom. Originally, it was Florida orange blossom, although we've since switched to Mexican orange blossom that we get from B Seasonal in Arizona because it's just more consistent and available because we had some issues with crops of Florida orange blossom not coming in and not knowing when we get it. So we only use Florida orange blossom for our trads now. But yeah, we do that, and it's got American oak on it. So that's pretty much, it's blueberries, orange blossom, American oak. It's called Elliott. Since then, we've had about 10 different variants of it. We do a brown, we do a chipotle one. We just did a hazelnut chocolate one. We do a double chocolate one, a vanilla one. It's on and on and on. So it's kind of like a big thing. It's our biggest, it's what we're known for, I guess. And so yeah, the process basically right now at the level we get, it's about 4 big stacked 1,500-pound pallets of blueberries. And I run up there one day and I bring them all our buckets. We use 4-gallon square buckets, and he harvests everything and sorts them. I'm pretty picky. I don't want a lot of stems and whatnot. You can get mechanically separated, but he goes through it and vibrates everything off. I get pretty clean berries, which I'm picky about because blueberries can get really earthy, and I don't want a lot of green. I went through that before. I don't want too much green stuff in there. So as much of the just berries as possible, and he does a great job for me now. We have a great relationship like that. I get them, and then I have someone pick them up in a reefer truck on those pallets. He stacks them, and then we use the square like buckets you can get at Menards or Uline or whatever because they stack on pallets well. Right. And you get about 20 pounds of berries pre-freezing and thawing, which leads you to the next step. I bring it right to a cold storage location. It has a freezer. Put them in there. It only takes a few days for them to get frozen, but we usually don't get to it till a month later. But they hold the berries. We pay a monthly fee. And then we go out in the truck and we pick up the berries, and it's go time because now we're on the thawing side. So go in the box truck. We get the pallets. We bring them back. They're already in the buckets we're going to use. Initially, it's a lot of work. I'll tell you that. So I have pictures on me. If you look at our social media and you can look, usually it's around November, December when we make it. So you'll see crazy bucket pictures in the lines and the mass seas of buckets. This year it was an insane amount of buckets. But we take them all out. We take the lids off, loosen the lids, and we start letting them thaw. So they're totally frozen. So technically they get a bit cold macerated because it's usually about 3 days of thawing before we are ready to make the mead. I want them to get to about 55 degrees internal. So the first day is just getting them there, taking the lid off, separating them a little bit so they don't they don't insulate themselves with their own cold on the floor drains. And then it takes up the entire meadery, and then we go home. And the next day we come in, and they're usually a little thawed enough, and they start shrinking in volume. What's 20 gallons of the brim, once it's all melted, is going to be around 2 gallons. So we have a little headspace in there.
Oh, wow. So
then I do use Lalzyme EX, a Scotts Labs product. That's a combination of several different enzymes, pectic being one of them. I think it's really great for breaking down fruit in a lot of different ways. I think you get pretty good color extraction from it. And it really increases your juice yield. And in Elliott, there's really not a lot of water in it, mostly just the yeast starter. So we need all the juice we can get from the berries so we can dilute the honey. And so then the second day, day 2, we come in, we dose every bucket individually with Lalzyme, and then we go through with a paddle mixer and we just mash it up a little bit. At that point, it's usually at 45 degrees. And then we just let it chill. And then the next day, come in and mix it up again and take the temperature. And then, usually by that night or the next morning, we're ready to make the mead. And we have a few ways we've done it. But honestly, if we have barrels of honey, we'll use a honey pump, and we'll use a scale, and we know how much honey we're putting into the buckets in our total honey, and we just distribute the honey in the buckets. We go through and paddle mix it, and then we're dumping all these buckets into a fermenter. So it's pretty, it's pretty
That's
crazy.
Awesome. So no water. You're not using any water.
Yeah. So with Elliott, it really depends on the year. It depends on a couple of things. a lot of times the pH can vary. They can be very acidic. This year we had an issue with that.
Uh-huh.
When I started the must, it was like 2.9, and that's just too low. And because you're risking stuck fermentation. You're also making yourself have to go sweeter to balance that acid out, and then just getting too acid. I want it to be finished around 3.3, like it's still pretty acidic. So we had to buffer it a little bit this year. We had a little bit of issues and got a little behind on it, but yeah, it's pretty crazy. We let them melt. We throw the honey in there. That's why we have to let them warm up. Sometimes we'll warm up the honey if it's coming out of a barrel, which is my ideal method. We'll get the honey to about 95, 100 degrees, so it flows well through our pump. We have a flexible impeller pump that we can use. Put a TC valve on the end of it. It's on a remote control, and we pump it, turn it on, turn it off.
Yeah.
If the honey's like 90 degrees, mixing with that, we'll end up getting like a 70-degree mix. It mixes pretty well, but then you're using this paddle mixer with a low torque drill, and you're mixing the honey with the berries and the liquid that's in there.
Yeah.
And then usually we do about like I said, we did 6,000 pounds of berries this year. It takes about 6.5 pounds per gallon of starting volume of berries, and then roughly 4 pounds of honey. So the only water is like nutrient additions, and occasionally like a little bit if we don't hit our volume, but it's a very minuscule amount. It's not much. And if the sugar's super high that year, sometimes we've gotten them that have been 16 bricks. We like them to be around 12. Yeah. Then we might add a little bit of water just to get the bricks of the fruit where we want it for the ratio of the honey. And then for our starter, it's a pretty big starter. We're pitching, we do dry yeast. We use a lot of the Lalliman products. We use all kinds of stuff, but we're pitching, 6 grams per gallon.
Man.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so, yeah, for a 400 gallon batch, it's a lot of yeast, it's a lot of water there, but that's only, that's where most of the water comes from. And that's pretty much it. So.
Well, one of my favorite mead recipes that I've been working on is a blueberry cinnamon. In the process, obviously, you're talking about how to treat blueberries. Really, any fruit is going to benefit from pectic enzyme. And I think, that's something people need to hear is when you're dealing with fruit, pectic enzyme is not just for color. It is also to help pull the juice and to break down the fruit. And, your yield of 6 to 7 pounds for a gallon, if you don't use enzyme, you're going to double that easily. You're going to be trying to use 12 pounds of fruit to get the gallon of.
Yeah. So basically it goes in whole fruit. I mean, everything goes in there. It looks like a red wine fermentation when we're done. Uh-huh. And I prefer pump overs now to punch downs. I have great punch down videos too on our socials. And you can see, I have punch downs where literally, I have to put a plank on top of the tanks and put all my weight into it because the fruit cap's like, 2.5 feet thick. And I'm just not strong enough or heavy enough. But the pump overs work really good. We got good at pumping over. We have, the right equipment now to where we can recircuit. But physical punch downs are still better in a lot of ways because even though you're recircuiting it, you're not pushing those berries to the bottom. So mechanical punch downs are still good. We still do them, kind of do a combo. Yeah. But yeah, it's wild. And yeah, I have to get maximum liquid extraction from it. And there's no way to really do that. I would never recommend doing it without an enzyme. That's definitely a really useful tool. And for a lot of things, fibrous fruits especially. Yeah. That, are going to hold, you don't know what you get until, you could leave a lot of liquid inside the fruit too. And you really want to get maximum yield, especially when commercial it costs. Cause it's about 6.5. We get about 65 to 70% efficiency right now. So, if I have, 400 gallons, I'm going to get 300 gallons of finished product. Man. And all the rest is fruit. And that's post-pressing. So then we post-press. Like red wine style. So all of our stuff gets agitated. We pump it into a bladder press. And we let all our free run go, and we pump that into a tank. And then we press it. Usually the last runnings we put into a separate tank so we can blend it if it's a little too tannic. Usually it's not an issue. But yeah, it's all post fermented. When we're done, we have a dry, clump of like you're fermenting red wine, and then it goes to the farm for compost or for the pigs to get a treat.
Man, those pigs are living at large.
Yeah,
That's fun.
Yeah.
Hey, so you have a lot of experience with obviously starting and being fresh off, and this could go down a giant rabbit hole. And unfortunately, Zoom is again pushing us away. But what are some for people who are listening and kind of thinking in their head, if I wanted to even begin considering making a meadery, what are some what's the first thing you would suggest for them to do? Is it recipe development? Is it where are you at?
First and foremost, a meadery is a business. And that's one of the things people forget about. I mean, you can make great mead and really suck at business. So take a good look at yourself and know that you're ready to sacrifice everything it takes to be all in. It's almost impossible. There's guys that do it. So nothing's impossible. I'm just going to try to give you the truth, right? I'm not going to dissuade you. If you're that confident, do it. But it's almost impossible to try to hold a full-time job and then run a meadery and expect the meadery to be successful. So when we started this, we put it all in. We went all in. We didn't have jobs. We worked full time at this, and we still work all the time. I mean, 7 days a week, there's something going on. So it's because we keep wanting to grow it. But yeah, have the time to dedicate. You need a good product, but you also need a good brand. So make sure someone in your group is willing to put the time in to spend time in the social media networks, taking good photographs, representing your brand. Also, a tasting room is super important. We need to introduce people to mead because it's still relatively well known, unknown in the mainstream. So have a tasting room because that's where you're going to develop relationships with customers. You're going to represent your product. You have a place for people to come see you. We're a tasting room first, distro second business model, and I think that's what everyone should do because there is no massive distribution of mead in the U.S. There's some people that do it well, but even they, struggle sometimes, and they have tap rooms. So, I'm going to start getting into the distro, but this is after 3.5 years because you're going to make more money in smaller batches, pay more attention to it in your tap room. You're going to meet customers. You're going to learn about mead. You're going to learn from them, and that'll get you in the distro. But we need to create a mead scene before we can start. You might have a couple accounts in the beginning, but are they going to rebuy it or is it sitting on the shelf collecting dust? Yeah. So that's something to think about. Hey, make sure you're in a good location that has a community that's willing to support your art.
Yeah. Where can we support you guys? How can we get a hold of you?
Yeah, so we're very active on Facebook, Manic Meadery, and Instagram, Manic Meadery, mostly mirrored posts. Manicmeadery.com has our Vino shipper link and some information. Some of the stuff's a little outdated. The more current stuff's going to be on the socials, but there's accurate links to our Vino shipper where you can order stuff. And the socials are definitely like Facebook and Instagram. We don't really Twitter. They're pretty much the way we communicate. We post quite often, and that's probably the best way. But yeah, there's stuff. I think we ship to 42 states, 43 states now. So
sweet, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I'll be putting all of that down in the description of how to get and to you guys and be able to support you guys. Tony, I appreciate your time. Thank you for talking to us and being honest. Sometimes and talking to people, ask questions and I understand it because we don't want to give away all our secrets by any means. But I appreciate you just even like the blueberry stuff. Some people might have said, actually, I don't want to tell you how I treat my blueberries. But for home mead makers, obviously, we're not going to go and buy 6,000 pounds of blueberries anytime soon. Maybe one day we'll get there. Right. But for now, learning from you is helpful to us. So thank you for your transparency.
Yeah, I mean, it's a passion of mine to collaborate. The homebrewing community is tight with me, and I mean, I'm a firm believer in spreading education. I appreciate what you do here. It's a really, really cool thing, really cool channel you have going. Like I said, I've seen your videos for a few years now, and I think it's really neat. I'm really excited to see it. It makes me excited that, something's going successful because it's only going to help the industry. That's why I'm very transparent. And hey, to each their own if they're not transparent. But, I'll talk anytime about stuff, and I don't really have a whole lot of secrets, and most people who know me know that. So I'm not worried about it for sure.
Well, I appreciate that. And we might be in contact to have a big old discussion about, I might even bring in my friend BC. We can all chat about laws and regulations because he's also I was going to say a big fan of them, but he's not a big fan, and so I think that might be a fun conversation. So
yeah, I'm all about it. You can have me back anytime you want, and I have no problem talking, as you can probably tell.
Hey, well, I appreciate your time. Again, if you are listening to this or watching this, feel free to go check out Manic Meadery and all of the avenues you can find down there, and go support them. Buy some stuff, because while you're making mead, that's fantastic. You should also buy some mead to support the mead community. That's why we grow. It's because we work together. So, so thank you, Tony. I appreciate your time, man.
All right, thanks, Garrett. Cheers.
Cheers.